Hi, everyone. Very welcome to yet another episode of Captain Speaking. I think it's number 19 in the order right now. My name is Petter Hörnfeldt, and together with me, as always, I have the wonderful and beautiful, good looking Ben Watts.
Geez, you can tell I've paid Petter to this week, can't you? But yeah, welcome everybody. My name's Ben. Great to see you here. Petter, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm in pain.
Oh, no.
Just back from CrossFit.
Oh,
As you should be, every part of me hurts. And my CrossFit trainer always does, like, we do an hour together, and then he puts at the very end, when you've kind of exhausted all of your muscle strength, then he does a what he calls a pequeño WOD, which is Spanish for a little WOD, which is, for those of you who's not into CrossFit, basically anything that hurts in with cardio. so
oh,
so he had today we did, he put me, those skiing machines
yeah,
that you like pull down and you have
yeah.
to. So we started off with doing, first you do a minute of like normal skiing, and then you do 30 seconds of as much as you can possibly do, and then you do 30 seconds of slow down, and then another minute. And we did that times three. And when you come to the third one, you're like, I'm gonna do my very best now, and you just like pull, and at the very end, then when I was completely exhausted, it's like, great. Now we go over to the rowing machine, and we do the same thing over there.
Oh,
It's relentless, but it's great. It's great. I mean, I've never felt better in my life. So
you definitely come away from those feeling so much better. You're glad you did it. At the time, it's hell. I remember doing, it sounds very similar to when I do turbo training on the mountain bike. And I think so much of it is up here in your head.
mm,
When it comes to failure point or quitting point, I've done so many sessions where you do these kind of like ramp tests where you're on the turbo and you put a certain power out, and then it ramp up to a certain power output, so it feels like you're going up a hill on this turbo trainer, so you're not actually moving, and you're putting a lot of power down, and then it'll go up to another big notch, and you're having to really work now. Like, it's effectively making like a steeper hill, and then you think, oh, your heart, you can see your heart rate going up and up and up, and then it goes to even 2 minutes later it'll go up even more. And then now you're kind of like redlining, and you've got another ramp coming up for another 2 minutes at the end of this. And you think, there's no way I can do this. But then that kind of competitiveness in you comes in, and you get to that one and you feel it ramp up. And like your heart's up at 200, your legs are burning, they're screaming at you, but generally you get there. And at the end of it, you're like, I mean, I'm throwing up on the floor nearly, but you walk away going,
yeah,
"Oh, man, I did."
but I'm going to tell you that works as long as you have an accurate picture of what you have ahead of you. So
Yeah.
yeah, you do your best, and you know there's going to be another hill, and you know you're
Mm.
going to push it. But I can tell you, the worst thing in the
Yeah.
world is when you think you're done, so
Yeah.
you've given it your all, and then someone comes and tell you, "Yeah, by the way, let's do that, but in a different machine and twice as much." That it's just it's
Oh,
so destroying.
destroys you. I think the military even use that to try and test their special forces. I remember once going back to bikes, I used to do a lot of riding with a good friend of mine who's a paramedic, and he was a nutcase. He used to race in the 24-hour mountain bike world championships. So they would race for 24 hours. So he had like a diesel engine in him. He would just, once he's in a certain heart rate, kind of like 140 beats per minute, he would just go, and he would
Mm,
keep going forever. Whereas I'm training for cross country, which is an hour and a half of just redlining. So very different types of training. And I went out on a ride with him years ago. Normally I do 20, 30-mile rides. And he said, "Oh, we'll go somewhere different." So I went out, followed him, we're chatting away, relatively decent pace. And then we get to about an hour and a half. And I'm like, I have no idea where we are. And I'm starting to feel a bit tired now, because that's kind of the length of my training rides. And I said, "Whereabouts are we? How far from home?" And he goes, "Oh, we're not even halfway yet." And I'm like, "Oh, no way! I'm ready to go home now." And he went, "Yeah, we've done about 30 miles. We've got about another 5, and then we're halfway." I said, "No way, man! There's no way I can do this." Anyway, he said, "Yeah, you can." And anyway, I carried on, and we kept going. And he said, "Look, and the way I got through it, and it kind of learned a valuable lesson, is we chunked it." He said, "Look, there's going to be a stop where we're out in the middle of this British countryside, nothing to be seen." We said, "Look, in about 7 miles, we've got an off license, or like a news agents, where we can get some coffee, some sweets, get some energy." I'm like, "Okay, I can do another 7 miles or so." And so I get 7 miles, and then we stop, we sit down, we have some, a coffee, feel a bit refreshed, and we kind of do another 8 or 9. And I'm thinking, okay, now we're like 40 something miles in. And I'm thinking, oh, man, how long we got? We ended up kind of chunking it. And it got to a point where I'm now like 60 miles into this ride and I'm hanging. You know, my legs are done. I'm thinking I just need to sit down. I'm gonna have to get a taxi. I'm gonna have to get a taxi home. As no, he said, no way, man. He said, look, he gave up. He gave me an analogy. He said, look, it's a bit brutal, but he made the point. So I don't want to offend anyone, but he said, look, if you got a phone call now from a guy that was just broken into your house and said that he was with your wife and kids, and if you didn't get home in the next hour, he was going to kidnap them or whatever, would you get home? I went, yeah, of course. He went, well, there you go. So you can get home. It's just your brain telling you don't want to.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. And that part of compartmentalizing thing, I
mm,
don't know, because I can't for the life of me understand those people that do not only 24-hour rides, but there are people who do this, that these like super marathons that
oh,
go on forever and ever. And for a normal person, it seems impossible. Like, how
mm,
could you possibly push your body to that length? But it has to do with what you're saying. It has to do with putting it into, manageable bits, and
mm.
then obviously being well trained. That's
Well,
that's prerequisite. But I think it's all in the head.
it is all in. That's what I've learned from years of training. You want to stop, but the wanting to stop is here.
Yeah.
Um,
And the interesting bit is that this goes for any way of life, and
yeah,
whatever you want to do, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve is exactly the same. You think that you need to stop, but in reality, you have probably only used up 10% of your capacity. If you're starting something, let's say you're starting a YouTube channel, which I've good experience with, or you're starting up a company, or you are going into flight training, whatever it is, that mental blockage that you get, and you feel like, I can't do this, and I just come up against roadblock after roadblock. Yeah, that's life. Get over it. Take a deep breath, keep going, and eventually you will get past it. And I think it's something, I'm afraid that in the world we live in today, people are just not coming up against that many like obstacles. And we're talking obviously in the West now. When we're not, if we're outside of people who are struggling for food or health, we're talking about people like you and me who are in the middle class and are working with that. I just don't think that the kids are getting those obstacles anymore. We parents, and I'm guilty of this as well. We just we just curl in front of the kids,
yeah,
and a big part of growing up and becoming successful is actually failing at stuff and
yeah.
realizing that it's not the end of the world when you do fail.
100%. And I think we're seeing it more and more with the generation. When I look at my kids and now they're kind of getting up to older teens and looking at some of their friends, and it's very easy as a parent because, like you said, you want to hand everything to them on a plate. You want to make their life as good as you possibly can. But you know, by doing that, you're potentially ruining them. They need to have their struggles. They need to overcome the barriers and the hurdles and get that sense of achievement.
Yeah,
And if they just get, if they just get everything given to them, then there's no self worth, there's no achievement, and there's no motivation to go and do more
no.
because you just got it.
This is hard. Eh? Being
Oh,
a parent and being a parent for teenagers today is not easy,
no.
because you have opportunity. I mean, go back 2 generations, and this was never a problem because hardship was what you had, right? And there would be glimpses of where you could treat your kids to a birthday gift or a present at Christmas or whatever, and they would really appreciate it, and they would really like what they were getting, no matter how small it was, right? Because the rest of the life was kind of hard and shit, right? But then you go, like, we've had it relatively good, and we've been blessed with living in a lifetime where there hasn't been any major wars, at least not when in the countries that we live. um, and we haven't really had those hardships, and now we're kind of giving that on to our kids, that nah, life is pretty chill. Like,
Yeah.
one thing that drives me mad is when you realize you go to school and you realize that the parents are blaming the teachers
Oh,
for the grades of their kids. This, and I, I hope, for the 15-20,000 people who usually listen to this, I hope that you can agree with me on this. That when did that happen? When did the parents stop blaming their kids for not trying hard enough and started blaming their teachers for the grades?
It's shocking, and the teachers now, they seem scared to discipline children because they don't want to face the wrath of the parents. And when do we get to that point in the world?
I I don't like I've told my kids that the teachers, when you go to school, the teachers are an extension of me. You know, you treat them in the way you treat me, and
Mm,
if you do something that would offend me,
mm,
I am expecting the teachers to tell you in the similar way that I would tell you off, and you listen to them. And
mm,
if I go to school and the teacher calls me and says that there's a problem, I will listen to the teacher as a fellow adult, and I will take their side,
mm,
providing that they can show me what the reason is. Obviously, there's going to be teachers who are not doing a good job as
mm,
well. There will always be that side of it. But like as a default, I will believe the teacher when they say that you have been misbehaving in school. So that's the kind of that's what you can expect.
yeah,
But
and
that doesn't. You're absolutely right. The teacher seems to be really really afraid of
mm,
what the parents might say if they would tell the kid off for not behaving properly. And
and as soon as you take the consequences away from anything, the kids have, because the kids now, they know that if the teacher shouts at them, they can go back to their parents, and the parents are then going right into the school or come into the school and have a go at the teacher. So that it takes the consequence away from any kind of action now. These kids, if they're not careful, will just run riot, absolute riot with no consequences.
And of course, the reason that that upsets me so much is because both you and I work as type rating examiners, right? Where we really give consequence.
Yeah.
Like, there's no there's no like forgiving. There's no calling your parents when you haven't performed in your license proficiency check. It's just pure consequence, and the consequence is you do not get to continue working until you have reached the standard that we expect you to have. You can't call a friend. You can't call a parent. It's just you, and this is the way that the life is. This is the way the world works in most, no matter what, no matter how much nice the internet companies out there and Silicon Valley might be to you, it doesn't matter. It's going to be up to you. If you do not perform, well, then you will lose your job, or worse. So us kind of curling for our kids, and them not seeing any consequences for their behavior, it's not going to save them. It's not like the rest of the world looks like that. it,
No.
the world is a cold place, especially if you're not up to scratch from what you're supposed to be able to do.
No, and this loops back round to being giving doing looking after your kids in that way. It does them no favors at all, because I think we know that mental health with, young men particularly is at an all, these problems are all time high. And I think a lot of that is to do with their transition from this cosseted home life where they're seeing stuff on social media, people making millions and how easy it looks. And remember, comparison is a thief of joy. They're looking, comparing themselves to this, and then they get into the real world where no one really cares about you. You're there, you've got to do the job. If you don't do the job, then you're in trouble. And it's this harsh reality now, and it's this contrast from what they're used to. Whereas as a parent, you've got to build that up so that when you let them go into the real world, they're prepared for it.
Yeah. No, no, absolutely. Really, a big part of being a good parent, I think, is to show them the kind of consequences that they get for their behavior. That is both positive and negative. It means that when they have really performed and they've really done something well, that's what you tell them. But when they have not, when they go to school and they've not turned in their assignment on time, or they've done a subpar work, you have to tell them that, like, well, if that would have been me, if I would have now created a video that was subpar, no one would watch it. And I wouldn't be paid, and my sponsors would not be happy, and I would have to, b compensate people for a lot of this. So there's no in my world and the world that you're about to enter, there's no one who's gonna give excuses for you.
No,
Not at all.
not at all.
So, and this is like, you've taken up the issue of mental health among young men, and I think that is an increasingly hard issue. It's something that we really should be paying more attention to, because I think that we're in a generational shift where boys and men have had it easier the last couple of generations. They have kind of been not given, but it's been expected from them to get into certain jobs, and their life would have been reasonably smooth ahead of them, providing they just did certain things. But today, the much more competition for the same jobs, and with AI coming in, it's going to be even sharper.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that right now, I think young men that are actually more vulnerable in the early years, I think,
Mm.
than young women is
It
to a
seems to
certain
be.
extent.
Yeah, it seems to be, and I think that social media does play a part in that because they're watching what they think the world well they should be according to the world or what these influencers are saying, and it doesn't fit them, and they can't do because it looks easy.
Yeah,
You see these big influencers going out, "Oh, I made £1 million by doing this quickly, and you can do the same." Of course you can't. Otherwise, we'd all be millionaires.
yeah,
You know, but it's a hard thing for them to get their head around. I think they grow up thinking, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be a YouTuber and I'm going to have 10 million subscribers," uh, and then the reality is that's very unlikely.
yeah.
Uh, and then
Yeah,
it's just a letdown.
and I'm telling them as someone with millions of subscribers
Mm.
myself that of course it's possible, but it's a slow grind. It's something that happens over 10 years of working hard.
Mm,
You know, so now and also I should clarify, I'm not saying that young women has it any easier, of course, but especially with social media, that is a horrendous issue. But when it comes to, I think, just males have a we just less, especially in the ages where we have our kids now, which is like 14 up to 16 in my case. They're just not as mentally developed as the girls are. Their head, they're more kind of centered, and the boys are less focused. And this is where our role as fathers, but as parents in general, comes in, and we have to teach them these things.
yeah. But I think from a selfish view, for our own bubble of our family, if we're doing this job right, as I said to the boys, it's going to pay you back because your competition is going to be that much smaller. It's going to be tiny because there's so many people out there that are just wasting their days playing computer games and scrolling on social media and doing nothing. If you're out there doing stuff with your life, more, great for you.
Oh, for sure. And I would like my oldest boy. He's very tired of school, and he's on the autistic
Mm,
spectra. So he's struggling with school, as has always been. But he's really really good with his hands, and he's really really creative, and has these fantastic abilities that I don't understand where they come from.
mm,
That's the other side of the coin of autism, is that
yeah.
he can focus about these specific subjects, and he knows everything about it, as in everything. And I said, like, listen, let's see if we can funnel that enormous ability into something that you enjoy. Let's say you can become an awesome electrician,
Mm,
work something with your hands, because in a few generations, maybe only one generation from now, no one is going to be able to do anything with their hands anymore. No one is going to be able to fix fix a light bulb, or unclog the toilet by themselves. So I think that there is a generation that's going to come up now where everyone has studied to become, um, you know, uh, an economist, or work within computer science or whatever. But no one has studied to become those essential work skills that we all as a society need. So I would really encourage anyone who's tired in school now to go out and learn a skill like that, because you are going to be able to take gold with a knife if you can.
yeah, yeah. My 15-year-old, I said the same thing. He's so creative. He can go out and make stuff, and he loves doing anything like that.
Hmm.
But like he's not great. He's dyslexic, so he's not great at maths and English. But I said to him, look, that's not where your future is. Your future is creating stuff, and if you can do that, then that's where your future lies. But just do. It's important they do something they enjoy. But yeah,
And that they have grit. Like, I cannot overemphasize. I think I mentioned this in earlier podcasts as well. As grit is the thing. It's the thing that will supersede everything. Someone who's real building, like someone who's willing to go a million times with a tiny amount of stones, will build a much bigger house than someone who's willing to carry a huge stone two times. It's as easy as that.
and it goes back to what you're saying. To get to where you are now, it's taken what, a decade. And if you gave up whenever it got difficult, you wouldn't be here. You would just be, oh, one day I did a bit of YouTube, and that would have been the end of it.
Yeah, exactly. But I saw, and grit has been the thing. I was never very good at school myself. Like I wouldn't say that I was struggling. I was struggling with maths when I was young, but during like my formative years when I was 14 up to 17, 18, I got good at math just purely by studying. And I went to this government sponsored pilot school that I've talked about before. And the way that they took people in was they did this suitability tests before, like IQ tests and loads of those kind of things, which meant that the class that I was in was some of the top students in Sweden, as in the one that, because only the ones that had the very highest grades was even invited in to do the interviews. So the highest performing kids at age 17, plus they were now checked through these like suitability tests to be even more intelligent, right? So you can imagine the kind of classmates that I had. Like these were the kind of people that, to a large extent, that you just look at the book and had absorbed it, right? Super annoying people, and I was living together with two of them, two of my best friends when I was there, and they were like that. They didn't need to study; they just needed to pay attention, and then they got it. But I was never like that. I always had to sit down after school with my math book and do like 100 different of those examples in order to actually get it. Which, but it gave me something, and that was something that I've been using for my entire life since, and that is I had to work to get where I wanted. But once I saw that I actually got where I wanted anyway, I managed to get into this school, which was my goal since I was 14 years old, right? And that was through grit and hard work. That showed me that basically everything that you can do, providing that you stay healthy and that people around you are healthy,
Yeah.
you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of that resonates with me as well. Not naturally brilliant in school, but you just work when you get that motivation and that determination to succeed, it changes something in your brain. I did things and performed in ways that I'd never done in school because I had that goal that I so desperately wanted to achieve, and it generated what I ended up doing. And once you've done it once, like you say, it gives you that motivation to do it again, to stick with something, not to give up when it gets hard.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And
Yeah.
thanks for the TED talk.
I
This was not
was
what
not
we were going to
expecting
talk about
20
today
minutes.
at all. But this is also why I love doing these podcasts with you, man, because we kind of we spin out into these areas, which is where the really interesting things really is.
The real life. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now,
Yeah.
before we go on, we are going to be talking about the runway excursion that happened in Hong Kong earlier on today, actually, because we're recording this on the 20th of October. But before we do that, I just want to point something out, and that is we do get some sponsors for these podcasts, and they provide the economic kind of foundation for being able to produce this, for having people that edits the videos and to put it out to the different platforms and everything. But this is a pretty niche podcast. Like we're not getting that many views, 15, 20,000. So it's a decent platform, but it's not like any of my other channels, which are getting hundreds and thousands of views, which means that we're not getting sponsors on every episode. And today is one of those. And I would like to take this opportunity to tell people out there about the courses that you and I have created, of the virtual 737 course that we have created and we've refined over the last couple of years, where we basically tell people how we operate as 737 pilots and how they could do exactly the same using their own home simulators, or just watch it if you're interested in seeing how pilots actually work, because we give live examples. We go through an entire flight from A to B with every single button switch explained in the way that you and I explain things.
This stemmed back, and if I think back now you've mentioned it, I remember having a chat about this years ago, because you and I, we get a lot of direct messages through social media and so on, and a lot of messages, particularly that I get, is oh, I flight sim, and when I go LNAV, it doesn't do what I thought it should do, or when I do this, it doesn't do that. Why could that be? And I used to reply, and it takes a bit of time, and obviously that stemmed that kind of spark. And, well, maybe we could just present this in its entirety in the way that we do it,
Yeah.
and not only what we do, but why we do it, so that it makes sense, and present it. And we did, and we went through it, and we did the whole course, from a cold, when you walk into the flight deck, day one, cold, dark cockpit, all the way through to setting it up, taxiing out, departing, climbing, cruise, setups, levels, descents, taxi landings, go arounds, non-precision approaches, turnarounds. We even did a max differences course, didn't we? Where and this all follows the same footprint that we use in the real world. So it's really based on the real foundations of how we fly the 737 for real.
Yeah. And do you need any previous knowledge of flying?
No, not at all. We've had such an amazing group of people, haven't we? I mean, we've met some amazing people that have come from every corner of the globe, from every background. We've never didn't know the first thing about a 737 to people that I've met cadets at work that said, "Oh, I did your virtual 737 course. It was amazing. It's a great way of prepping for our type rating." So everything from that to people that don't even have a sim, but they just love learning about how we operate.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
am super proud of it. It's over 10 hours of instruction materials in there. You get checklists, you get a workbook that explains each part of it. It's very structured. You have access to these videos forever once you bought the course. And if you are interested in this, then go to virtual737course.com, or there's going to be a QR code if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're using the code Captain, you get 20% off the price that is stated there. So do use that. But we're super proud of it. And I think that if you are into flight simming, or if you just want to learn how we pilots do our daily work with some fun stories from the flight deck, you should check it out as well. It could be a great Christmas gift now when Christmas coming up for the person who has everything but are really interested in aviation. So just putting that out there, and thank you for checking it out.
awesome.
Now, having said that, so this morning I was walking up with an SMS from Spiros, which is my script writer, saying, "Have you seen this?" And it was about a Boeing 747-400 that was operating flight Echo Kilo 9788 from Dubai over towards Hong Kong. They were working on behalf of Emirates as a freighter, but it wasn't actually Emirates who flew it. It was a chartered flight, not a chartered flight, but a leased company that was taking care of that specific flight. Now they had departed on time from Dubai, as far as we can see, and they came into runway 07 left, which is the brand new runway in Hong Kong, and they landed there at was it 0357, I think, local time, something like that. Anyway, from the ADS-B data that we can see, they landed normally, and then they tracked the center line of the runway for about 700 meters before they suddenly veered off to the left. And in the process of doing that, they obviously hit a car, a vehicle that was on the parallel roads to the runway, killed two people on board, and then proceeded out into the water where the 747 broke into pieces. And the four crew members that were on board managed to evacuate safely, so they survived. But like we said, there was two fatalities as part of this accident. And the question that everyone is going to have out there is like, how can something like this happen? And well,
Well,
I
what we
mean,
can, yeah. I mean, we can talk about it. I mean, it's a tragic. It's tragic that that car happened to be there at that time. But we can. This is classified as what we call a runway excursion. This
yeah,
is what this will be classified as, and it is the leading cause of global accidents and incidents at the moment, and they're rising.
yeah, and obviously we will have no idea exactly what caused this particular one. There's going to be a full-blown investigation now, so it could well be something that I feature over at Mentor Pilot at some point. But for now, it's not even worth speculating. It could be anything from some kind of malfunction in the landing gear to that they try to avoid something. We don't know. So the only thing we do know is that it happened, and what we want to talk about now is why runway excursions are the leading reason for hull losses at the moment, and why it's one of the very few accidents out there that is on the rise, where everything else is getting better and safer every day. This is not. It's actually getting worse.
No. So we can kind of go through this because it's something that we train when we're as type rating instructors. This is something that we will train. Runway excursion prevention is a big part of initial training. It's a big part of recurrent pilot training as well, raising awareness of it. And it'll be interesting to kind of tear this apart today with you and I and look at leading causes, what we do and what pilots do to prevent it, how we can prevent getting into these scenarios in the first place, and what can lead to them. So, I mean, it was interesting reading, looking at Airbus. Airbus released a report in February 24 last year, and they based on the data they've got, runway excursions are the primary cause of hull losses. So these are the largest cause globally, as Pet has said, for aircraft being written off. So airline flying is getting busier. The sky is getting busier, but this is still increasing, whereas others incidents on examples of controlled flight into terrain, for example, are decreasing. So we can look into what causes this. So what should we go through first? Leading causes of this and then what we can do to mitigate it?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So the leading cause, looking at the league tables at the moment, and unsurprisingly, is unstable approaches.
Hmm.
Do you want
What?
to just explain what that is?
Yeah, I know. Um, so unstable approaches, we've mentioned that previously on the podcast, and it's basically when we're coming in for a landing, we're supposed to have certain criteria fulfilled in order for it to be a safe and continuously safe landing. That includes, for example, having the aircraft configured for landing, so landing gear down, the flaps in the correct position. But it also means that we're supposed to be on the speed that we have briefed that we're going to be, that we are following the glide slope if we have one of those, and the localizers, so we are in the slot. The descent rate is okay, and there's no tendencies going anywhere. So basically, this is a as the word suggests, a stabilized approach with the checklist completed, both of us being able to focus on the landing that we have ahead. But there are, of course, cases where we end up with approaches where one or more of those parameters are not fulfilled. What would be an example of that?
So an example of that would be we pass, we'd have to be stable at these gates that we've mentioned before, typically at 500 feet on the approach or maybe 1,000 feet. So we have to pass through these gates, as Petter said, stabilized, and that would be very objective. This is very objectively described. So typically speed between your approach speed and maximum of 20 knots above your approach speed, for example. You need to be in the landing configuration, so you can't be selecting flaps at that point. You've got to be, the flaps need to be out, the gear needs to be down. We need to be on the extended center line. We need to be on the correct approach, and all the checklist needs to be completed up until the landing clearance. So you can see that if we don't get to that point with all of that, or at least with any of them done, if one of those is not met, the safest course of action is just to go around. And you hear crews doing it. They'll go around and ATC will always say, "Oh, could you let us know the reason for the go around?" The crew will come back, "Yeah, we just weren't stable at the
Yeah.
gate." No
And
problem.
it's super important to point out here that any airline out there should have a no blame policy for go rounds.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
I cannot overemphasize how important that is. So that there might be that you have to fill in a report because people want to keep track of why this happens, right? So it could be for example, if a lot of people ends up going around at one particular runway, well, then there needs to be statistics so that maybe something needs to be changed on that particular approach, or air traffic control needs to be briefed about something. So we tend to have to write reports about it, but there should be no blame on the pilots for doing a go around, because doing a go around is always going to be the safest option out. So the reason you might end up in a situation where you're not stabilized could be that, for example, you are doing a visual approach and you haven't properly briefed it, or you decided to turn in onto to final towards the runway too early so that you don't have enough track miles and you end up high up. And of course, if you're high up and you try to get down, your speed is going to increase. So you can see how these kind of things, they tend to start rolling. Like
Yeah,
once w- uh, one part of the non-stabilized criteria appears, another one appears, and this just keep getting worse and worse. And that's why the industry have decided that no, if you're not stabilized, you go around, because it's just not worth it to continue. But it still happens.
it does.
People still continue because you have that inert kind of part of you that says, get the righties. I need to get down. Right? If you're pilot flying, you have your professional pride working in here as well. You just like, oh no, I've screwed this up. I'm going to fix it, and that leads a lot of people into situations where they do actually try to land from maybe an approach where they were just way too fast or coming in way too high, so they're landing far down the runway.
Yeah, yeah, and the consequence of coming in too fast. Someone will say, "Well, so what? You're at 21 knots too fast." 21 knots is, you're flying at 140, 150. That's it's not a massive increase. But what's interesting with the energy, because it's all about the energy of the aircraft at the end of the day that you've got to bring to a stop. If you increase your airspeed by 1 knot over above what you've calculated, you're increasing the stopping distance by 2%, which is a huge amount. When you start adding 10 knots, you're adding 20% extra stopping distance you need.
Mm.
And you start adding in contaminated runways, short runways. That's why people go off the end of the runway.
Yeah. So the people are coming in, and then there's a compounding effect to that, and that is when you're coming in too fast, or you're landing too long, or
Mm.
whatever it might be, you get an added stressor
Yeah.
that actually affects the rest of the things that you do. So, for example, a lot of people that comes in these situations forget to select the reverses, for
Mhm.
example, because they're now so focused on, oh man, I need to get this aircraft down and start braking, and they focus only on that, and then you're not in the normal flow now. So all of a sudden, you're starting to miss those things that you never miss otherwise. You miss taking the reverses, and if you end up on a wet runway or a contaminated runway with ice or snow or something like that, the reversers are doing a lot of the work to get that aircraft stopped. So you miss taking them, or you forget to take, verify that the spoilers, for example, are coming up. Now your landing distance are increasing with a further 25%.
Yeah. Yeah. It's this snowball effect that you were saying. And if you can take it even further, maybe they do get the reverses out. There can be another error that leads into excursions is once they've landed, people think they're stopping great. Oh yeah, we're braking, and they might be halfway down the runway and they just stow the reverses. We don't need those anymore. We're going to be stopping no problem. And then what they don't realize is that you're in the middle of the runway. There's no real rubber there because no one's touching down in the middle. But then as you're transitioning to the last third of the runway, which is where aircraft come into land when they're using the other end of the runway, that's now got all the black rubber from all the landings. You add in some moisture, snow, rain, that braking coefficient, the braking effect on your wheels can just diminish. And now the only thing you've got is reverses, and people then have stowed them. They're not available anymore, and it's too late by that point. And that's another reason why they go off.
Yeah. In any type of contaminated runway condition, like if you have slippery runway or the slush standing water, whatever it might be, keep the reverses available. You might not need to have them fully up at like 80% reverse, but have them not stowed so that if you need them again, you can take up all the way down to when you're at a safe taxi speed. And it's another thing that, okay, you brought up rubber, which is one thing, but I've been working out of Sweden during winter time for a good 7-8 years of my career. And the thing people forget there is that when we have these snow plows and the brushes that clears the runway, they are super efficient in the middle of the runway. But as they get towards the ends of the runways, they start slowing down and they start turning around, which
Mm.
means that the surface is less brushed the further you get towards the end of the runway. So you get exactly the same effect. And with those, when you're on ice, especially if it's like, proper ice, you you get, even if you're down to taxi speed, you get to that point and you put the brakes on. The anti-skid system, which is very similar to your ABS system in your car, it will just say, okay, it will feel that the brake, it applies the brakes, the wheels will immediately stop because they're now skidding. So the brakes will just release, right? Because the anti-skid will not allow the wheel to skid. So that means that even if you put full brakes, you get nothing. And I
Right.
mean nothing. I've been in this situation. It normally happens on taxiways or in turns, but if you're not ready with the reverses, then that might be the only thing that stops that aircraft, because you're braking as much as you like, it's not doing anything.
No.
And a similar thing happens. This is also something I flew the first officer once, which was, I never say that my first officers are annoying, but this guy was annoying. Like,
Oh dear.
yeah, 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 yeah. No, this was something else. This was a guy I had to have a debriefing with him afterwards, actually explaining to him that if you don't stop acting the way you do, you're gonna have a huge problem in your career with captains. He was one of those that was pointing out mistakes
Oh,
on, not like actual mistakes, but
I know what you
mistakes
mean.
in his view.
Yeah.
I would be flying. So this was a new guy, inexperienced, and I would be flying, and I would be going in VNAV, following the descent path down, and he'd be coming in and say, "I think you should use level change now because it's more convenient, or because I have learned how to do that." Those kind of things that just stings. It just irritates you because he doesn't know what he's talking about, but still he is talking.
Mm.
And as part of crew resource management, part of CRM, you don't want to have a conflict in the cockpit, which means that even as a captain, you need to kind of sit on your hands, bite your tongue a little bit, and not escalate something that might make him not want to speak up when
No.
something really,
Mm.
you know, important happens. So you end up just sitting there and it's like, yes, thank you. Yes, okay, thank you. But this guy, we came down and we landed in Eindhoven. Okay. And I was pulse flying. So we touched down, we were decelerating fine, and he decided that he was gonna go over and take manually put the speed brake down, like because that then
Mm.
disengages the outer brake. Okay, so it's one of the ways to disengage the outer brake is to put the ground spoilers down. Not how we do it. We do it by adding manual braking slowly and softly. That will also disengage the outer brake. But he did it that way. And the problem then is that if you're at high speed, which we were at like 100 knots when he decided to do this, the spoilers comes down the wings. And what happens then is that the wings are now producing lift again. Right? Not a lot, not enough to to get the aircraft to fly, but enough to bring it up a little bit so that the wheels doesn't have as much contact with the runway. And again, the anti-skid system will feel this, and it will reduce the brake pressure. Right. So as soon as he put that down, you could almost feel how the aircraft accelerated on the runway. And that's obviously it was probably still decelerating, but much, much less
Yeah.
than what it was just a second ago. So I up there pulling it out, braking hard to now, make up for what we'd lost, and then taxi off. And that was the time to explain to him who does what and when and why.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. It's rare though, isn't it? It's really rare. I can only think, I think in my 20 or 21 years of flying airliners, I think there's two FOs that stand out in my mind that kind of that resonates with, that kind of reminds me of. Um,
Yeah, it's very rare.
it's super rare.
Super rare. Like
Yeah.
everyone, you won't be best friends with everyone. Everyone has different personality types, and some get on with really well. Otherwise, you're just a little bit more quiet around, and that's it. But having someone who's like really really annoying to the point of, it was funny because I actually, like, the way that captains do, just like first officers. If you're going to be flying with someone, especially at a small base, you know who that person is going to be flying with
Mm.
the next day. So you like send a little message to the captain that you're going to fly with next day, and it's like, yeah, dude, just be aware that this is going on.
Yeah.
And I got a message, I think, the following day from the captain after like 2 sectors, like, what is this? And after the last 4 sectors was like, kill. So this was not some, like, this was someone who had probably an issue with his self-confidence or
Yeah.
something like that. It tends to be the reason why they act in that way. But you
Yeah.
should be aware, if you're a first officer listening to this, that the captains gossip just as much as the first officers do. and and we, like, even though we have the authority to put our foot down and stop these things from happening, we still don't, because of, like I mentioned, just because we're sitting together with this person for 12 hours a day. We want a nice time, so we're not going to be, biting someone's head off for nothing.
No. No, it makes it harder, and because we want FOs to advocate, we want them to speak up when things are going wrong, but it's getting that balance right, which 99.9% of pilots do. But you're always going to have the odd one that overcompensates one way or another.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, like, if you're flying with a really brand new first officer, as we do as training captains all the time, you will have people speaking up at the wrong time, right? But you'll notice that there's an honesty behind it. Like, this is someone who speaks up. It was not appropriate at this time, but this person thought it was appropriate. Hence, you go into the explaining. Okay, yeah, I hear what you're saying. We don't need to do that right now because of this, and it becomes a learning exercise. But there is a huge difference between that and someone who's speaking up in order to try to kind of put themselves on the pedestal. Like they're speaking up in order to speak, just for the sake of speaking up, for showing that they have knowledge that they think that someone else doesn't have. It has nothing to do with trying to help the operation or becoming safer or whatever it might be. It's just for showing off. And
Mm,
that right there is that line that you
mm.
shouldn't be crossing.
No, I mean, for me, I remember there was one of these two FOs. He didn't last in the airline, fun enough, unsurprisingly, but he had no kind of awareness of why our procedures were there. Everything, it almost came across that the procedures were a nuisance, which was very bizarre, considering everything we do is procedurally based. But I remember we're in winter ops, and which means we're departing in snow, and there's very strict winter ops requirements that you have to meet. As Peter, you'll know as well as I do,
Yes.
that there's when you're taxiing out in the snow, you're being de-icing. There's a lot more work that goes on to dispatching safely than when you're dispatching on a normal day. There's more checklists. We've got to taxi out potentially with flaps up. And anyway, we were departing, and we're kind of middle of the day. We're coming out of London, and it'd been two sectors of this guy constantly trying. Oh, you don't need to do that. It's just when you're in the sim. Or don't, and I'm like, and I was a relatively new captain at this point, and you kind of suck it up, and he got to a point where we were taxiing out, and we had our flaps up because when we get to the holding point, we'll then reconfigure so we're not exposing all the flaps to falling precipitation, small falling snow, and so on. And it also means that the de-icing fluid on the wing doesn't roll off because the wing isn't highly curved. So we leave the flaps up, which is we would never normally do. Anyway, we're taxiing out, and ATC come over to us and say, right, call sign 123, report fully ready for departure. You're number one at the hold. So we're not at the hold yet, but we're kind of taxiing to it. And he just goes straight on, yeah, we're ready. And I'm like, no, we're not ready. Yeah, we're ready. And I said, dude, I had to get on the radio. I go, negative, we're not ready. And then he kind of slapped his legs. He kind of went, we're gonna. This is just,
No
and I
way.
and I have to kind of, you kind of like, okay, you don't say anything, and we get to the holding point. So I knew what was coming, but he'd obviously missed it, or his head was somewhere else. I said, okay, let's do the checklist at the holding point now. I mean, he went, oh, you got that check, and he was such a deliberate, like making an effort. Oh, okay, right, boom, boom, and he's reading it like this, and I'm thinking, oh, dude. And he gets to the points where he goes flaps, and I went, oh, look, the flaps are up. And you can see him visibly kind of get a little bit shocked that, oh crap, we would have departed with our flaps up if we'd not done this.
Yep.
And I didn't have to say anything, but you could see the realization in his face and the way his mannerisms changed as soon as he'd done that. But yeah, we had to have a bit of a debrief at the end of the day. But as I say, he was no longer with the company. He didn't last that long. So
No, I mean it's shocking, because you would think, especially as a now, was he a senior first
he
officer at
was,
that time?
yeah, he was.
So that
Yeah,
was a bit of a problem. So he had already, gone through that, and probably that's how he had operated for a long time, and no one had, told him off. And wind
no,
drops, just for everyone that's listening, doesn't happen very often.
no,
So especially if you're based down Southern Europe or even in the UK, you might just get it a few times if you do fly up to Scandinavia or to the Baltic countries. So he might not have actually seen that, but that just makes, in the, in the head of someone who is a professional pilot, that just makes it even more important to follow the checklists.
jeez,
Right?
yeah,
If you're doing something that you don't do very often, that is really where you need to pay attention. And I can tell you that flying in wind drops is probably the single most dangerous operation that you do under normal circumstances. You have to be careful when you do that. Is one of the things that I brief the most, when I'm going out with someone who's not used to it. Is like, today it's wind drops, it's snowing, the schedule goes out the window, right? If we miss a slot, so be it. If we're late, so be it. We are going to be late. Just forget about it. Now it's about operating safely,
yeah.
because it's one of those things. If you try to make it on time, that's when you push, and that's when you miss something. And like you said, you could try to depart with the flaps up, which has killed a lot of people.
It has, and it's frighteningly easy to do if your head's not in the right place. And I say it's funny listening to you because we've not spoken about this before, but I say very similar things. When it's a winter op day, I say on the ground we're going to be slow. Today is slow in
Yeah.
flight, fine, but on the ground it's slow.
Yeah, and it's going to be, and it is painfully slow,
Mm.
and it is painfully slow for a reason, because there's so many extra steps added. And now, we've, as we do, strayed away a little bit from the from what we were talking about, which is runway excursions. But yeah, there's no question that runway excursions, they happen because of these things. Now, we've seen an increase on the 737 fleet. That's likely because 737s, by their definition, is flying into shorter runways, smaller fields, especially here in Europe, and also over time they've become bigger. So longer, stretched versions, heavier. And of course, heavier machines going into shorter airfields, we obviously always check the performance, but the margins are shrinking from when there was a 737-100 or a 200 that was landing on those same runways. They would be able to stop easily, while an 800 or a max might be, having, not that much of a margin once we've done our calculations. So you can kind of see why it's happening if you're not on the ball. But
Yeah.
what do we do? What do we do then to mitigate?
So to mitigate, we're talking about runway excursions then. So every good landing, as we know, starts from a good briefing right up in the cruise. You're thinking about, and this is where we get into threat and error. A big part of commercial flying is threat and error management, something that I think maybe isn't as widely understood as it could be. But just to elaborate on that, a threat and error is something we would brief. So we would go, okay, the threat today, we're talking about landing. Maybe it's a short runway, maybe it's a crosswind, a wet runway, contaminated. So a threat is something outside of our control as a pilot. We have no way of controlling. If it's a short, wet runway with a crosswind, nothing we can do about that. If that's the only runway we can land on. An error is when the crew do something that they shouldn't or don't do something that they should as a result of that. So when we're talking about threats, the mistake that crews can sometimes make is they'll list off a load of threats. Okay, threats going into this airport today. It's a short, wet runway with a crosswind. Okay, great. Yeah, it's true. But the important bit, you've only done now 50% of that job. The important bit now is what are we going to do to mitigate that threat?
Hmm.
And then we have a discussion about it. Okay, is there another runway we can land on? No. Okay, let's do our landing performance. Let's use this flap setting. Let's use this auto brake setting. Let's make sure we're stable at the gate. If we're not, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to go around, monitor my actions. Am I getting reverses out? If not, call them. So that when we get there later on, half an hour later, our brains we know what's coming. And if anything is missed, we've spoken about it and we know what we're going to do to mitigate that. So that's a big part of that. And then it's a matter of sticking to that plan. And then if things start to go wrong, hopefully we've anticipated these potential threats and we can recognize them when they occur, which enables us to recover later on. That's a big part of it. A briefing is super important when it
Hmm.
comes to managing these.
Absolutely. And I really want to just re-emphasize your point is that you have to discuss how to actually manage it.
Mm,
Like,
yeah.
it's so easy to forget that step, and that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Like you said, maybe maybe we'll go with a unusual auto brake max, for example,
Mm,
just to give ourselves some more margin.
mm,
Make sure that I touch down on the touchdown zone. If
yeah.
not, call a go around if you feel that it's not safe. We even have short runways where we have like a
Yeah.
no pass point, like you
Yeah.
calculate a point before which you have to have touchdown.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you do a bulk landing and you go around from it.
And it's a really important thing to do because you're giving the pilot monitoring who's monitoring you now. If you said, look, if I don't land here or you have any doubt about where I'm landing in the right place, you just call go around. I will go around. We'll think about it. You're now giving them that confidence to speak up because one of the real dangers with these overruns is the fixation on landing, as Petter mentioned. You get in the flare and you see crews do it. You'll get in the flare, so which is where you're kind of just getting over the runway, and maybe you flare a bit too soon or you're a bit fast and you just float down that runway. And you can see the hands on the thrust levers, they should stay there, ready to go around, but you can see them migrate to the thrust reverses. They'll kind of
Yeah,
just migrate forward to the thrust reverse, waiting to touch down. And that's where you can see where that mental switch in their brain has flipped, that I am committing to this landing. And they're floating and they're floating and they're floating. And now, if you do need to go around, your hand is over the thrust reversers, not on the thrust levers, ready to activate toga. So it's being aware of that fixation and not allowing your body to do that.
yeah, no, absolutely.
Mm.
So before we go any further, there are three phases to a landing. Do you want to go through them?
Yeah, three phases. So there's the approach phase, there's the touchdown phase, and then there's the rollout. And that's typically how we break down an approach when we're training it. And we look at the potential threats in each area and what are we going to do to mitigate those. So the threats for on the approach could be, like I say, destabilized approach because of winds. It could be a steeper approach to normal, which means keeping our speed under control could be an issue. It could mean there could be a reduction in lighting on the runway. Maybe there's a NOTAM out that says that the PAPIs, which tell us whether we're high or low on the approach, are not working today, which means we have to visually judge whether we're high or low. That could lead us to landing long. So we look at each one of these and we'll come up with a solution to mitigate that. Maybe it's a wide runway or a narrow runway. There's all your optical illusions. Then we get to the touchdown phase. What are we going to do? Where are we touching down? The latest touchdown point, actions to be done. And then we have the rollout. What are we going to be doing at that point? You're monitoring ground speed, you're monitoring distance remaining. If I'm not, you're going to tell me to get max reverse. There's all of these elements that we will approach, brief, and kind of mitigate threats against. And that's the three main phases of the whole kind of landing. So next time you're kind of coming into an approach and you're sitting there, you can think of these three phases, from the approach, the touchdown, to the rollout, and what the crew are doing to make sure it's safe.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that the landing is definitely not done after touchdown. Like, this is probably one of the biggest misconceptions out there. People start applauding when the aircraft is touched down safely. Now, first of all, the fact that they touched down safely might actually be a bad thing, because it might have meant that we eaten more runway than they wanted, right?
Mhm.
So, but the applause should come as you turn off the runway, because we, like, not only once we've touched down with the main gear, we still have to land the nose gear, which is a thing in itself. And then you have all of these strategies for starting the deceleration. Is it the brakes kicking in like they should? Otherwise, manual braking. Are we getting the spoilers up so that the weight of the aircraft sinks down onto the brakes to maximize the braking? Do we have the reverses? At what setting should we have the reverses? When should we stow the reverses? Like, there's a whole lot of things that happens from the touchdown that you feel until we turn off the runway, which is a really important part of the landing that not many people actually think about.
And you want pilot monitoring being really active in this. I mean, I have had auto brake failure on me, well, at least twice. And sod's law would have it that twice that they failed was when I had auto brake max setting on a very short runway.
But that's when it fails. It is when it fails, because it
Yeah.
otherwise it has loads of good time on it to kind of self-check and
Yeah.
start braking a little bit smoothly. But with Auto Brake Max, it really needs to engage
Yeah.
quickly, and that is when it fails. But
Yeah.
also it should be said that that's also when we're most you've selected Auto Brake Max for a reason, so
Mm.
you're going to be very focused on that fact that they are working, and if they're not kicking in within a second after landing, you will be there.
You're on it.
So it is
It's
like
very aggressive, isn't it?
the threat would probably be bigger on like a medium runway, let's say a 2,100-meter runway or something like that. That is long enough, but still not very long.
No. And I think you notice it less when it's a contaminated runway, because on a dry runway, as soon as you touch down, there's a second maybe as the wheels spin up, the transducers in the wheels are sending signals to the system, and then suddenly the brakes just bite, and you get this really rapid deceleration. It's really impressive. But if you're landing on a runway that's covered in ice or snow, and that braking effect isn't there, you're still going to select auto brake max, but you're not going to get the same level of deceleration, simply because of the anti-skid system kicking in. It's not going to be able to lock the wheels like it can, or really bite. And that's where, if that auto brake fails, we have a light that comes on that might not be in my field of view because I'm looking out the window, but the pilot monitoring should catch that and call auto brake disarm.
Yeah.
And at which case you're like, what? And then you can just apply maximum brakes yourself to manage that. And I actually had it once where I was coming into Katowice in Poland, which is was a notoriously rough runway with a crosswind, contaminated runway at night. It's the only time it's ever happened to me. And we're coming into land. We land with a bit of crab on because it was a contaminated runway. It wasn't a good braking action. And we landed, lined up with the runway, and then got the reversers out, got the brakes out, and you could feel that anti-skid locking and unlocking the wheels. And then the aircraft started to weathercock into wind.
Ooh.
Yeah, you know where I'm going.
Yeah, I know where you're going with this.
And, and it started to drift downwind. I started to drift off the centerline at a kind of a crab angle. And the reason for that is we have something called a sideways braking component. And I maybe show up a graphic on screen here, but when the aircraft is not aligned with the centerline, so it starts to crab into wind, your braking vector, which is coming from your wheels and your reverse thrust, is obviously going straight out the back of the aircraft, like slowing you down. But because you're not aligned with the centerline, there's a side component of that that's now pulling us off the side of the runway potentially. And the only way you can really correct for that, because it's a horrible sensation, is to actually cancel your braking for a moment. So you take off the brakes and you just bring the reversers to idle. That gets rid of that vector, that side component. You now got full control and it came back instantly. You line yourself up with the runway and then you reapply the brakes and it was fine.
And this is why you need a lot of extra margins when you're coming in those
Yeah.
situations, because now the aircraft is not decelerating
Oh.
anymore or not in the same way as you're realigning yourself and you're still eating runway.
Mm.
It's that one is really nasty, but it's also something that we do practice in the simulator
Mhm. It's a
almost
lot of
every
fun.
year now.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to do in the sim.
It's a lot. It's a, yeah, yeah, yeah. I love doing that in the sim because you have to sit as an instructor. You have to sit and kind of
You
work
do.
with the braking
Oh,
actions. So you have
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
like take braking action to nil in order to get that exact feeling. And
Exactly.
then as they start doing it correctly, you have to bring it back again.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Yeah,
But it's yeah, I don't know. I love doing
yeah.
that. Listen, we're up to an hour. So let's take a question from the audience
Yep.
before we wrap it up for episode 19. Okay, and as always, you have been sending in loads of questions. Don't worry, we are banking them. So when that episode eventually comes, I can't promise we'll go through all of them, but as many as we can anyway. So let's see. Spiros has been sending us here. Hi, Peter and Ben. Could you tell me what moment or part of your flight training you loved the most, and which part was the hardest? Love what you do, and kind regards from Joachim. So, eh, I mean, the initial part of flight training when you start
Mm,
is lovely because you're now fulfilling a dream that you've had for a long time, and there's more than one time that you kind of, uh, you find yourself sitting there after having done a touch and go landing or whatever, and you just realize how incredibly cool what you're doing is,
mm,
and that happens a lot in the beginning. But then, as you, at least for me, when I got into commercial training, it becomes much more focused and harder. So it's now kind of like something that you need to get through.
mm.
But the single most fun I think I had was probably when I did my MCC training.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, well, because that was the feeling when you've been doing all of your training in a single engine or propeller aircraft, and then a dual engine propeller aircraft. But we then went to do our MCC training together with airline pilots, right? So we're not talking about the normal instructors that we had, which was maybe previous students or career instructors. But now there was an airline pilot there, and I was doing my MCC course in a Fokker 2028, an
Oh,
F20.
nice. Okay.
So you read, all of a sudden you're sitting there in the real cockpit and there's jet engines and
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
like, so it was that feeling that you, now I'm getting somewhere, like
Mm,
this was where I was heading and now I am getting there. Now we're talking about two pilot corporation and we're reading checklists for each other, and it became real in a
yeah,
way that the normal training did not. So the
yeah.
MCC course was I mean, I had a blast. I did it at SAS Flight Academy in Stockholm
Nice.
on their Fokker 28, and it was a blast.
Nice. Yeah, I think, I'd be very much with you on that. There's so many really sort of pinch me moments in my flight training where that reality of actually doing this, I can remember, I think doing the type rating as well. I remember joining the airline that I was doing it with and going to the head office for the first time and seeing like the captain jackets hang up with the gold stripes. 'Cause I'd not had gold stripes really at that point. And you know, that reality of wow, I'm actually in an airline. That was a real kind
Yeah,
of amazing. And starting that type rating was incredible. I remember one day actually on my commercial flight training when I was in a single engine aircraft and we were doing instrument training. We started flying just on instruments. It was actually on my birthday, bizarrely. So it's a lovely day in the summer. And we had to do this departure, this standard instrument departure, manually flown, obviously raw data using VORs and NDBs. And part of it was an DME arc, which is quite challenging to fly just with a propeller aircraft. And you're basically keeping a set distance around a beacon. I say it's 10 miles, and you've got to kind of keep edging away around this to keep a set 10 miles. And I remember I'd been practicing it in the sim and I got airborne and I flew this and I managed to keep it by using the needles so that it didn't go any more than zero point 0.1 either side. So I managed to keep it bang on 10. And I remember that sense of like satisfaction that, oh, that's cool. And I remember that thinking that's the best birthday present ever that I could actually do that.
well,
That was,
that is the nerdiest birthday present
I
that
know.
anyone's ever gotten.
That, welcome to me. Yeah.
No, but I understand exactly what you mean. though the sense of achievement when you do something super hard in
Mm.
your flight training and you nail it,
Mm.
like you do an NDB approach and it just comes out, you
Yeah.
sit with that cue, that DME, the NDB needle just where it's supposed to be, and you take the HUD away, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden the air runway is there. Like
Yeah.
it is. You guys that are going into flight training have a lot of fun in front of you.
You
That's all I
do.
can say. A lot of hard work, but a lot of fun as well.
And enjoy it. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think we will stop there, right?
Yeah. 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 Cool. I'm looking forward to doing the Q&A session because there's so many good questions that I want to.
I know. You guys are so interested, and we're getting so much lovely feedback from you.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
it is really humbling and really nice to read how you guys are enjoying the podcast, and we're super happy about it. So, if you're listening to this on any other platform than YouTube, please leave us a like and subscribe to it, because that will help the algorithm to help us meet more people. We want more people to know about this, because we do think that even if you're not in aviation, there's probably some good lessons to be had from this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think on that note, again, thanks a lot for listening or watching, and we'll see you in a week.
Take care, everyone. See you soon.